Welcome today to the craft and business of developmental editing fiction with Sharon Yim-Leos and Susan Chang. My name is Linda Ruggieri, and I'm the Professional Editors Network Mentor Liaison. And before we begin, I need to share with you some general housekeeping rules for this presentation. You are welcome to use the chat feature to interact with other attendees on the side of the main conversation as you'd like, but please use the Q&A feature if you want to submit questions for Sharon or for Susan. And if possible, we will wait to the end to answer questions. If you don't know how to ask questions or where the Q&A button is, it's accessible along the bottom of the Zoom window in most views, as it should be the option to toggle the automatic captions on and off if you'd like to turn them off. If you don't see the option you're looking for, you might have to click the More button that has the three little dots on the bottom right of the screen. Remember that all messages, both public and private, are automatically saved as part of the meeting record. However, chat messages will not be posted to the PEN website or anywhere else, and we don't read through private portions of the chat record. The video recording of this meeting, on the other hand, will be posted to the members only section of the PEN website. And let me see. And for those of us who are joining as guests today, access to the recording of past meetings is one of the benefits of PEN membership, and you can find out about that perk and other really great perks and how to join PEN at pensite.org/join. So we have 22 participants right now. Welcome, everybody. I am excited to introduce to you today two wonderful editors. First is our moderator, Susan Chang. Susan is a freelance developmental editor with 30 years of experience acquiring books at Big Five publishers. She began her publishing career at HarperCollins Children's Books, where she worked for 9 years before moving on to shorter stints at Hyperion Books for Children, which is a former imprint of Disney Publishing Worldwide, and Parachute Publishing, a book packager. She was a senior editor at Tor Books, which is part of Macmillan Publishers, for 17 years before launching Susan Chang Editorial in 2022. And Susan will be speaking with award-winning author, developmental editor, and former publisher at Goosebottom Books, Sharon Yim-Leos, who has edited and coached writers, as well as has had multiple book deals from Big Five publishers and film and television options from major entertainment companies. She is the author of 21 children's books, leads writing retreats, and teaches writing and publishing for universities and conferences around the world. And with that, I will pass on the mic to Susan.
Thank you so much, Linda. And thanks everyone for joining us on Valentine's Day. So I'm just going to make a short little introduction and then go over the structure of the meeting, and then we'll dig right in. So as Linda said, after 30 years in corporate publishing, with my final 17 years at Tor, I took the leap and resigned in July of 2021. I took 5 months off to decompress from those 30 years in corporate publishing. And I also used that time to research and strategize on how I was going to strike out on my own and be successful as a freelance developmental editor. So I did a smart thing. First thing I did is I got in touch with Sharon, and she became my mentor. One of the first key bits of advice she gave me is charge, like make money by charging for things. So we first met at the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference in 2018, which she was running at the time. She is brilliant. She's a woman of many talents. She's great at everything she does. And when Linda read her bio, she didn't even mention that she's also a fine artist. So, and she's good at everything. So that's even more rare. But one of the reasons that I asked her to sort of strategize with me is because I had asked her for a sample of a developmental edit letter that she had written, just so that I could kind of gauge, like, oh, can I really do this? And I have been writing editorial letters for 30 years, and it's very much, publishing is very much an apprenticeship training system where baby editors, as they called us, learn by reading the editorial letters of our bosses and executives and senior editors. And I read Sharon's letter, which she had written for one of her clients, and it's honestly one of the most impressive I've ever read in all my 30 years. So I just knew that she was the person to sort of help me. And not only is she great at the craft of the developmental editing, which she'll sort of share some of her pearls of wisdom with us today, but also her business acumen. I'm going to kind of show you her website. But in terms of her marketing, she's brilliant. She gave me great advice on rates. And also, I'm going to be forever grateful to her that she was kind enough to edit my website. And, I'm not a designer. I went on Squarespace, when I was launching in January of 2022. And I asked a couple of people to look at my website. And one of them was my good friend from college. And she just basically said, "It hurts my eyes." And then she just didn't give me any more comments. It had this orange background color. But Sharon was kind enough to pour through the whole thing. And she really helped me. So before we dig in, just the structure of this presentation will be that for 45 minutes or so, we'll be discussing the craft and business of dev editing. We're going to try to do sort of an intermediate advanced level. And then I'm going to ask Linda to put up a poll because we're interested in what you guys do. And then we'll both answer audience questions for 15 minutes. And then if we have any time, I will quickly share a slide deck, which is just going to be mostly of resources that I use in strategizing the business. I'm going to also make available some examples of my editorial work, which will be posted later. And we'll be talking specifically about fiction dev editing. I know that Sharon also edits nonfiction, but we'll mostly be talking about fiction and also about working with clients whose goals are more in the traditional publishing rather than the self-publishing world. Okay, Sharon.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, by the way.
You're so welcome. You know that I think you're amazing.
Thank you.
So you have had a successful career in advertising before you even became a dev editor. So can you tell us a little bit about what was your path into it and when and how you started?
Well, the path into advertising, which in the end was so useful, has been so useful for me, all the way through all my different career changes, was that I came in as a copy editor. So I should take a step back. My first job out of college, I got a degree, a BS in biology from Santa Clara University. And I went back to Hong Kong where my family was staying at the time. And it was supposed to be just this 1 year off before I did a PhD because my whole family wanted me to be a doctor, or at least have doctor somewhere in my name. And so it's just supposed to be a year off. And I got myself a job writing for the Hong Kong Standard, which is an English language newspaper in Hong Kong. And it's the second English language newspaper and is really far behind the leader. So it was kind of not taken, nobody took my position there very seriously. But I had a great time. I was writing professionally. I discovered that I absolutely love writing. And then I came back to California. And instead of going for my PhD, I wanted to get a job in writing or in publishing. And I found that I didn't have the right degree for it, right? Because everyone wanted an English degree or a journalism degree. And one day I happened to be back on campus visiting an old professor, and he said, "Yeah," he goes, "your background is exactly right for this job that's been posted forever on the alumni board that nobody seems to be able to fit because they're looking for writing experience, but a life sciences background, like a life sciences education." So I applied for the job and I got it. And it was as a copy editor for a scientific advertising agency, one that specialized in science and technology, which is why they wanted the life sciences background. Just like a little interesting name drop was that Amy Tan had at one point kind of applied for a similar position in that agency. And my boss thought it was really funny that she had turned down Amy Tan and taken me. And I always felt heartbroken that Amy Tan then went and wrote the Joy Luck Club and like kind of stole my book. But yeah, so that was how I got into it as a copy editor in advertising. And then in 2002, I published my first children's book, and that was Ruby's Wish. And it was a big success. You know, it still is. I still get fan mail every year, which is really sweet. And that opened all kinds of doors in publishing. And now I've published 21 children's books. And at a certain point in 2010, I decided that I wanted to start my own publishing company because I had a very strong idea of some books that I wanted to bring out that weren't on the market and that nobody seemed interested in bringing out. Like even the publishers who were friendly with me were like, well, give us one book and we might publish one, you know, and then we'll see how it goes. And now I know why that makes sense. But at the time I was like, that was not my vision. I wanted a whole series of these books. And basically what was happening was that Disney princesses were swallowing up the world. And I'm a history buff, and I wanted to put out there that there are all these real princesses that are much better role models in my mind for, you know, my little nieces. So I did in retrospect, very crazy thing. I started my own publishing company, and we brought out like 18 books before I sold it. And then I sold it in 2017. And by that time, I had a great time with it. But by that time, I decided that I wanted to focus on my own novels, like, and move from children's writing to writing for adults. And also, I had completely gotten the bug for teaching. And I was teaching and mentoring a lot of writers, and I was starting to edit for them. And so then my career path changed again. And then that part of my world grew and grew, as you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm much more into mentoring and helping writers than doing anything else. So I teach for Stanford Continuing Studies. I mentor and coach my own students. I curate this huge community of writers. Well, not so huge, very intimate, but very, very solid community of writers. And then I do engagements like this, for example.
Yeah, so that's amazing. So how did you first get your teaching job? Like, so you had contacts from being a published author through Chronicle and other traditional publishers, but then how did you sort of parlay that into, like, who gave you your first teaching job and what was that? Like,
okay, so I think I think one of the big tips here that I give to my writers as well is that, and one of the things that has given me the success, like in making all these different career paths, including developmental editing, is that if you can break things down into steps, right, you can do it. You know, it's like a version of what Mao said about the longest journey starts with a single step. So I sat down one day, I thought I'd really like to teach, you know, I'd really like to try. I don't have any teaching credentials, don't have an MFA. So what's the first step? Like, what's the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit? And I thought, well, my community college, right? Community college offers, you know, there are all these retirees out there who suddenly decide they want to write books for their grandchildren. I'll start there. So I started at the local San Mateo Community College teaching picture book writing. And then from picture book writing, you know, they said, oh, well, that went really well. So what else can you teach? So then I had like a little bevy of 3 courses. And then from there, I thought, well, the thing about community college writers, no offense intended, is that they're not very experienced or very serious writers, and I want to teach people who are writing one level up, right? And I thought, well, who teaches that? So the writing salons in San Francisco and Berkeley, they've been running for a long time. At that time, they were under Jane Underwood. So I found Jane Underwood's email, just Googling her. And then I wrote to her and I said, look, I've been teaching this for, CSM, and I would really like to come and teach for you. And so she said, okay, we'll give you a shot. And, and she did, I think I started with Picture Book with her as well. And then we went to MGYA. And then in the meantime, because I've been teaching for these people, I was invited to teach for the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference, which you know well.
Right.
So I started, I kind of appeared on one of their panels. I started as a panelist, and then a couple of years later, they said, "Do you want to actually come and do a workshop?" And so it kind of like got bigger and bigger. I ended up actually being their executive director, but but so the whole thing can kind of grow, like kind of grew and snowballed. And then at a certain point, when my resume looked good enough, I thought, well, like, who are the best people to teach for really in this area? And my opinion was that was Stanford's continuing studies. They have such a good program there, and they also invest so much in their teachers, that they actually teach you how to teach, and they pay really well. One more, plus you have the Stanford name, so what more could you ask for? Right. So I pitched them, and they started me with like a 2-day class, and then and now for the past, since COVID started, I'm teaching full quarter classes basically every quarter.
I think this is just such a brilliant thing to sort of be an example of, is that the ability to sort of look around your local community and just start with just like one step, like your community college. And everything that Shirin just said about Stanford, she invited me to go teach with her at Stanford. And I literally started my business in January of 2022. And just from knowing Shirin and using all of her contacts, or just, and also co-teaching the class at Stanford, that led to like me getting a lot of business last year as well. And so I think that the fact that you, like, most of the people who do developmental editing that I know come from the industry background. And so we do have, we are lucky in some sense that we don't have to kind of like make our own way to making these contacts. But I think that the lesson to take from this is that if you live anywhere, I know that a lot of people that Penn is cited, like the offices are in the Twin Cities. That's one of the most literary communities ever. And every community has like a library or like, community college and a bookstore. It's just going in and networking and meeting those people, and just kind of, I think that that's a really great way to go. I'm just going to go
way back when, actually when I was in advertising, I got a piece of advice from a colleague who said to me, who used to like win all like the sales awards and stuff because he was such a good salesperson. And I said, when I started Goosebomb, I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I hate selling stuff. So how am I going to sell my books? And now as an editor, how do I sell myself? I hate selling stuff. And you're such a good salesperson. You tell me. And his tip was, he said, the best way to sell is to think, how can I be useful? And that has like opened so many doors for me, because I just always think, okay, quite sincerely, how can I be useful in this situation? And you add the value in, and the value comes back to you, right? So like you, teaching for Stanford feeds my editing pipeline, and I think that you always have to think, especially for editors like me who can't say, oh, I came once from Random House, or I came from Tor. You have to think, like, what is the biggest hurdle to someone hiring you? And for a dev editor, that's always trust, right? Like, why should they trust you with their baby? How do they know that you're going to read it carefully? Like, it's such like a, it's like snake oil. It's like, how do you know this is the right snake oil? You don't know. So always it comes back to trust. So the people who come to me already know me, right? They've already seen me in action. They've seen me in class. They've seen me like do sample edits of people. And so by the time they come and find me, they already know me. They already trust me. They just want to know whether they can afford me, which is something that we have to discuss, and whether I have time, because, you know, a lot of them are in a hurry. And so always, this, I think that if you're, you know, to all you listeners out there, like if you're worried about how can I get that pipeline robust enough, right? Just think of it in terms of why should they trust you and how can you convince them that you are trustworthy? It's all about earning that trust so that you don't have to deal with it when you're actually negotiating the deal.
And you can start with something small and that could snowball. But the other thing after that is to be really good at your job. And so I'm going to seek into the next thing. I'm going to share my screen and show you Sharon's website, because of course it's amazing. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things, which is this cool thing. So Sharon bills herself as a Tiger editor. And I want to know what you mean by that. And does that scare your potential clients at all?
Well, so I think it does scare some people, and it's there on purpose to scare some people, because I think that part of being successful in this is finding a niche, and the niche is not, it does not mean necessarily like a genre niche. You know, you just have to be very clear as to what you offer. And so actually what I say on that website is actually true, that two of my clients independently like teased me for being their Tiger editor. This was like 10 years ago when people were not so worried about, you know, nowadays probably wouldn't pass the woke PC test, but they called me the Tiger editor. Both of them actually came back as clients, and I edited their second books too. So obviously I did a good job on the first one. But I picked up that phrase and I thought it kind of really, it kind of puts the warning sign out there that if you don't want, some people really want someone to either hold their hand or pat them on the back or tell them that they've done a great job and they're a great writer and go out there, you know, like they want like a cheerleader. And that's not the kind of editing I do. Now, I'm going to tell you, you know, because I believe that my job is to be your most like astute, but also most attentive reader. And so I'm going to tell you every single thing I see. And I am famous amongst my writers for absolutely covering the page every single time. We're going to talk a little bit later about dev editing versus other forms of editing, but I always do a little bit of line editing on the side, whether I like it or not, because I will just tell you what I see. And if you don't come with the right attitude, that's just going to crush you. And then you're going to be dissatisfied. And then you're going to go away and tell other people that Sharon's not a good editor because she hurt my feelings. So I don't want those writers, you know? So yes, Tiger editor helps me screen them out. Yeah. So and even if you're not that tough, at least you're warned so that you're braced for it. And the last 3 words on any editorial email I send out with my dev report attached is brace, 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 you know? So
yeah, like in a plane crash. But I am on your website again because I wanted to sort of like scroll through some of these really amazing success stories. I know that a lot of dev editors have our testimonials from people that we've worked with, but everybody who's in this meeting, if you go back to her website and you go through her amazing success stories, I think that's the proof in the pudding. And so you have that's like the level of trust that you will have in people who want to achieve the same thing. We're back again. So what is your approach to dev editing? Like, what's your process? What do you include? And you're going to share your slides with that.
I was going to share a few slides, just because, I really believe that this terminology changes, from one person to the other. So that I do this when I teach, when I'm talking to students, to writers, that there's this world out there of editing, and there's like something called dev editing, there's something called line editing, there's something called copy editing, there's something called proofreading, and all four of them are separate, but they overlap. Right. And I think that a lot of new writers, especially, they don't understand the distinction. So for professional editors, this is the problem, because, they'll come to me and go, oh, well, but I got an edit and it cost me like, $200, and now you're asking for $5,000. It's like, how is that possible? Well, it's because your edit was not a dev edit. Your edit was like maybe a bit of proofreading from someone on the side. So I think that it's really important to like get this clarified and know where you sit with it. And so I developed this chart. So to me, dev editing is all the high level stuff. Right? It's like, is the book working? Are those key elements in the book, like plot, character, pace, those big ones, are they working? And then, is each chapter working? Is the chapter in the right place? Should the chapter be there at all? And then a little bit down into the line editing bit, but something I always do is I'm always looking for the author's foibles, by which I mean, all those things that authors cannot see. Like, so I'm doing them the service of showing them, where they kind of like fudge things. A lot of, I'm an author myself, so I know it's like, you don't really know how your heroine is feeling there. So you kind of write a few lines and you hope that, you can get on to the next scene and nobody notices that you don't actually know what's going on. Those things, rescues, inconsistencies, that kind of thing. And then the line editing, to me, like, goes deeper, as the name suggests, onto the line and sentence level, where you're looking at style, efficiency, language, and grammar. Not to me, technically part of the dev edit, but always included in my edits because I can't help myself. And then copy editing, as you know, Susan, usually done by a different department altogether. But, the copy editor never asks whether the work is any good. Copy editor asks whether the work is correct, which is a different thing. So language, grammar, spelling, punctuation, consistency, and proofreading is like to avoid that train wreck where everybody has fudged with this so many times that they've dropped sentences out or words out or their typos all the way through it. So this is the way I break it down. And then so in dev editing, where we're focusing today, are these four big questions. Is the book working? Are key elements working? Every scene working? Author's foibles. And so is the book working? Standard questions I ask myself right off the bat: is there sufficient interest? Right? Because if your book is not interesting, we're dead in the water. So does it have conflict? Does it have high stakes? You need that for the interest. Does it have tension and suspense? Like, why should we turn the page? Is it intriguing? And people go, what's that difference between intrigue and interest? When I say intrigue, I mean things like, is there a mystery written into it? Is the world really different? Is the world intriguing? Do we want to see more of the world itself? And are the characters intriguing? Sometimes you can have a book that doesn't seem to have much plot, but the character is so intriguing, you have to watch and follow that character. So what snags or haunts us and will keep us in that book for those 400 pages? And then I think that part of dev editing is also, whether it has market appeal, will it sell, and that can come down to the topicality, how it's going to fit into trends at the moment, the universality, like, does it appeal to big human emotions and big human themes that have always been successful in publishing? How unique is it? Does it feel fresh? And, quite frankly and cynically, who is this author and what kind of platform can that author bring with them? And I believe that, and I say to my clients and my students, that dev editors are specifically there to help you get a book that that you want to either self-publish or have traditionally published, but that you want to get to a certain level, because we're really not talking about oh, I want to write as art, right? Like if you want to write as art, then it's all about like your own self-expression. An editor really has not that much to say to you. So so those are the things that I look at on the book working level. And then the key elements, of course, you'll know most of them: plot, pace, tension, structure, characters, world and setting, point of view, the audience, the voice, even the tense, like, are you writing in the right tense? Right now, I've been seeing a lot of writers come in writing third person present tense. That's so difficult. It's like, why would you do it to yourself? So let's have a really good reason. Change the tense, and it's going to like open you up for so much other
give
stuff.
it thought before you start and write in words, and consider that you could have written in a different tense.
Right, or be prepared to like rewrite the whole thing. And it's not a hard thing to do. I've changed tenses in my novel before. It's just that a lot of people aren't aware that you should actually think about it, and that it actually is a different tool in a different tense is a different tool in your tool set, in your toolkit. And then these four are the four that I really focus on as I'm editing. So every single dev report will have these four covered. And then depending on what the flaws are of that particular piece of work, everything else will come in on an as needed basis.
Right.
And then in the every scene working one, I think that this is the most difficult one for writers, because they kind of assume that because it's written, it should be there. So, is this every scene necessary? Does it advance plot? Does it deepen character? And then how is it written? Does the ending pack a punch? Does it leave us hanging? Is it efficient? Is it tight? Is it in the right position? I actually take the book apart and think of it as scenes and where they go and how they should fit. And then author's foibles, as I said, author's convenience is like when something just happens and it gets the author out of a mess of having to work harder to make it more believable. Uncertainties is where they're kind of fudging. They don't really know what's going on. Rescues is, as the name suggests, and it happens so often because authors love their characters that just when the reader wants things to get worse, things get like magically better. And pet words and phrases, of course, and cliches, both phrases and gestures. I pull all of those as well. And so then an important thing, and one that you touched on right in your introduction about what I edit. It's like, no matter what comes in and what project I decide to take, I really believe for all of life in this little quote that's attributed to Seneca, which is that no wind is a good wind unless you know which harbor you seek. So as an editor, if you come in, I need to know what your goal is. And I actually have a little exercise that I do with my authors. I stole it from Annie Lamott. She calls it her Dear Steve-O, because before she starts a project, she always sits down and writes to her youngest brother Steve-O about what she's doing, why she's doing it, the hopes that she has for it, really casual. I get that out of every single client. Because, like if you come in with a book, you give me a book that's like boy meets girl for forbidden love, depending on where you as an author want to go with a book, like as an editor, I can help you push it into like Romeo and Juliet, right? Or I can push it all the other way into like something like, Karen Robarts or Joan Crawford's sister. Jackie
I've read both of those books, and I actually like Karen Robarts better.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing. As the author, you get to choose which one you want to grow up to be, right? And as the editor, I firmly believe my job is to help you. My job isn't to sit there and say, I like Karen Robarts better, or I like Romeo and Juliet better. I'm supposed to know how to get there. I'm kind of the guide, but you have to say where you want to go.
Yeah.
So, my contact information that came in a little bit early. Any questions? But that is kind of like in a nutshell my approach to the dev edit.
Fantastic. Okay, so I did want to talk about the fact that you're so in demand that you can be selective. And there's always that age-old question when you are freelancing, should I specialize and choose a niche, or should I be more of a generalist? I feel like you work on everything. Is there anything that you don't work on?
So I don't work on anything that isn't narrative.
Okay.
So I do nonfiction, but the nonfiction has to be narrative, right? So if you're writing, there are different types of memoir. If you're writing a memoir that kind of reads more, you want to read more or less like a novel, has a beginning, middle, and end, has a story in it, then I happily work on those memoirs. In fact, some of my favorite clients have been memoirists. But I don't work on like cookbooks, for example. I don't do like true non-narrative nonfiction. I help people tell stories.
Right.
That's what I do. So if you have a story, doesn't matter. I actually don't edit picture books anymore, but I used to for many years. So, it's like I from picture book to like through to novels and into memoirs, I do all of those.
Now, do you approach, like, let's say you have an adult literary novel versus like a middle grade, or what I know you've edited a YA science fiction novel. Like, do you approach those differently at all?
Oh yeah, well, so for everyone, you have to know the genre well enough to know what the overall shape of that book is going to have to be to give it a good chance of market success. Right.
So the Seneca Harbor quote again.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, for example, if you were writing, what are the two extremes right now? If you're writing YA and you're writing like historical fiction, yeah, and you have a slow but kind of very atmospheric beginning, mm-hmm. I would probably say, oh, we can probably keep that, in a historical fiction. Because atmosphere and setting and all of that is so a sense of time and place is so important to historical fiction readers. That's what they gave you $20 for. So they're quite happy to sit through an opening scene of it. But YA readers, by and large, that's not what they gave you $20 for. They want to get on a roller coaster, they want to get on a ride, and they want to ride the ride to like take off pretty quickly. So that's that as an editor, I would do two completely different things there. Because of the genre. MG versus YA, very different genres. People keep thinking, well, because they do overlap, there's a tendency to think that you edit them the same way, but you don't, because MG readers in the end are very different from YA readers. And you have to know the readership, you have to know what they're looking for. You have to know for MG, for example, that you're right. MG is very tricky because you're writing for the young reader, but you're also writing to get through this whole battalion of gatekeepers, and so how do you like marry those two things together? And what is that end reader really looking, what emotional experience are they really looking to get at the end of the book? So very different from YA, where actually your average reader is not even a teenager, but like a 27-year-old female. So yeah.
Okay, so now I want to go more into the business aspect of it, how you build a successful sort of self-sustaining business. And I'm just going to show your website again, because I think you've done such amazing, smart stuff here. Okay, so just like everything's great. Like I love this, like your latest blog, which, I haven't even had a chance to read yet, but that's like, you're just offering so much great advice here just for free. Anybody could come on her website. But so the two things that I really love, and one thing I've always known about you, is that you create this community. And so you have like 500 people like on your listserv, or
what? 1,000.
Oh my God.
1,000 opted-in writers. But it's not I don't think it's a huge number. There are a lot of people out there with bigger numbers. But what makes my listserv really engaged. Sorry?
They're very engaged.
Yeah, but they are a very, very engaged list. And it's a very real community. It's not we don't just say we're a community and then show up to network, and it's a very engaged, very personal, lots of friendships have been formed there. Why I have such wonderful testimonials on my website is because those authors like most generously believe that I had something to do with their success. And with it comes this kind of feeling that they want to remain in the community and give back to the community. So we have, really nice experiences. Whether if you go to my website, you'll see that I interview people who and so my writers gather just like this for little workshops. So whether it's a workshop or we go on retreat or I have a social event, whenever these writers gather, it's just that's the thing I'm most proud of, is like how supportive this community is, and how the most neophyte little baby writer is so excited that in a retreat, she's sitting next to, you're coming on retreat with me next year, Susan. So she's either sitting next to you, or she's sitting next to some, Cameron Lund, who's like just sold her third book, or she's like, or Jen Alvarez, who's sold 8. It's like, but they're all together as like one supportive community of writers. But what that does for me is that there's now that large group of people out there who trust me, and now they trust me maybe for a different reason as my students trust me. They trust me because they've seen other people trust me.
I have seen this in action,
right?
Because I actually went to Sharon was kind enough to invite me to one of her retreats, and I did like little critiques for many of her writers. And just in between a span of like 3 years or so, I heard some of those same writers 3 years later read their work, and I cannot even tell you how amazingly they have progressed. And so you work with people over a long period of time, and you get them these amazing pub deals, which again is just very sort of like, that's the proof. And a lot of these people so this is something that you told me that you're going to be doing a little bit more of, which is these writers retreats.
Yes, yeah. So for a long time now, I think our first one was way back in 2014. I've been taking like 12 writers away with me, and we go for, usually it's like 5 days, say, or sometimes as long as a week. And we just spend a week, 5 days in seclusion. We write in the mornings, we eat all our meals together. I, in fact, cook. I love to cook.
Good at that too.
And then there are these great discussions around dinner, and then we workshop on a little more formally. We workshop every evening between like 5 and 7, and then we gather for dinner afterwards, and then we talk writing. And it's just this wonderful environment where you can be a writer. And so many writers tell me that it's so hard to be a writer because nobody really until you've published, nobody really believes your talent. Everybody thinks, oh, well, she's trying to be a writer. Everyone wants to be a writer. So it's really nice to come to a place where everyone takes you seriously and takes the passion seriously, because everyone knows what it's like and what it's about. And usually it's a great mix. I usually have a couple of editors there, lots of writers, some published, some not published. I always try and put 2 newbies into the group every time, so that we've got new blood coming in all the time. But yeah, and this year we're going to Greece. We're going to Corfu for a week, and then that sold out in 4 days. So, and there were so many people clamoring to get on that we're going back to Greece in 2024 for another week. So very excited.
So Susan and Sharon, sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to jump in quickly because we're at minute 40 for the presentation. And I know that you have some questions that you wanted to ask. So I'm going to erase myself again, and I'm going to launch some of the poll questions, but I didn't want to interrupt the conversation. I just wanted you to be prepared so we can share the answers. It will happen simultaneously.
Okay, wonderful. So we can continue talking while you launch, or no?
You can continue talking, but the poll will show up
Okay.
across the screen, so you might want to
Okay.
see the results in the question. So
Okay, wonderful. So I did want to ask Sharon about, like, so this is the other important, like, this amazing thing that you have created with your community of writers that I think, like, if you are maybe thinking about breaking into dev editing from like another kind of editing, or you're just not sure if you're kind of doing it as like a side hustle and you want it, like, you don't know, like, just in terms of developing your skills, your editorial skills, it's mostly critiquing. And what's really amazing about like the writers groups that you do as just part of your, not even on the very amazing retreats, but like just in your sort of like, you have weekly or monthly, you have a group on
Right. Twice a
Basecamp.
week. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so you have trained all of those people who attend those groups to be amazing critiquers, which I think is the first skill. So that must be like, I think that that is like the coolest thing ever, you know, because you can even, they could also become editors now.
I'm actually really proud of that. A bunch of them made it into the masterclass of the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference one year, and Jody Gurman was teaching masterclass, and she and I was super proud that, you know, of it's juried in, Jody juries them, it's juried blind, and maybe like 4 of my writers got into 10, you know, 4 out of 10 were my writers. And then she bumped into me in the lunch queue one day, and she just said to me, you know, I can tell who your writers are. They're like this person. And I was like, yeah, she got the list exactly. She said, she goes, I can tell who your writers are by how they critique, you know, not even how they write, but how they critique. And I was so proud of that. Yeah.
But that is like the most, like when I was a baby editor, and like Jeannie So, who we both know, she was your publisher on your picture book. That's like the first skill that you learn as an apprentice to an editor is like, you know, I remember she said to me, here, let's look at this thing together, and I'll just like, we'll just go over it. And I was just like, but I like it. And then that was it. I couldn't like really go beyond that. And so that is a skill that I think is very important for every person who wants to be a dev editor, because honestly, like, you get into this because you love reading. So you might just like be able to just be like, oh, I love this book, I love this author. And that's like, you know, that's step one. You're like the first reader of a new work. But then when it's not working, you have to be able to sort of interrogate your responses and pay attention to everything. Yeah. So I feel like that is an amazing, I keep saying that, but that is just another really fantastic.
Yeah. I think that, you know,
group.
I don't know what the results of the poll are yet, or how like experienced everybody is in this group. Oh, here I can see now. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, this is a very experienced group because you're editing full time. I mean, I'd love to ask the question of those editors, how many are dev editors and how many copy and line editors we have here. But look at that. So all these polls just answer my questions immediately. Yeah. So what I was going to say is that for all the dev editors out there, and for all because I've actually mentored another editor who came up from the copy editing route and then wanted to be a dev editor, and I mentored her too. I think that the biggest thing, the biggest skill to acquire is the ability to get that distance, you know, the ability to go up to 60,000 feet and see the work like on a much higher level, where you're kind of seeing how the landscape lies out and how it might have to be moved, rather than being so close in, both line and copy editing, and, you know, proofreading your noses on the page, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's learning how to get that distance, and yet maintain like an analytical eye that can catch everything, even though you're so high up. So
you're kind of starting at a high level and then just zooming in and zooming in.
Mm-hmm.
Through the whole process.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, did you have more to say? I have one more question.
No, go.
Okay, so this is a tough one. So what is your best advice on how to build and sustain a dev editing business in 2023? Because just from reading the EFA boards and anecdotally from hearing from my dev editor friends and other people I know, it's been a little bit tougher this year to get gigs. And, I know we're all like concerned about the economy and the recession and, challenges facing the publishing industry. And then of course, we're all going to be replaced by AI writers. So what do you do? How are you going to succeed this year?
I think that I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think that if there are fewer gigs out there, there's nothing that you can do to make them more gigs, right? That's not within your control. What might be within your control is to make sure that in a competitive situation, you get the gig. And so the question is, like, what is the biggest barrier to getting a gig? I believe that the biggest barrier to getting a gig is a trust issue. And so we'll go back to the pricing thing, because you actually said my advice to you was to charge, and so now that can sound as if I'm just saying optimize your returns, but it's not just that, right? So I've worked with publishers with editors before who have given quoted a certain fee. And that fee really is not sufficient to cover as much time as a dev edit takes. Like, dev editing is so labor intensive. And so instead what they do is they kind of skim. They kind of like, that they're reading like this. They do a skim, they deepen in, they do a skim, they deepen in. Most writers, I believe, me certainly, I can tell if you're skimming my book. And so no matter how good your advice is at the end of it, I'm going to leave feeling like you kind of cheated me, because I paid you to pay attention all the time and you weren't paying attention all the time. So I always charge what it takes me to feel like, even if this book gets really tedious, because some of them, I always look at the first 20 pages. A lot of them have like great 20 pages, and then they just like hit this part where it's very, very hard work to keep going. I always make sure that I charge enough that I'm like, no, they paid for you to sit and slog this out. To skim now is to cheat, because you charge for them to pay attention. And so therefore I do pay attention all the way through to the end. And that is why I get writers that come back time and time again, because they trust that I'm paying attention all the way through. And so I think that in the long run, even though I lose people who can't afford my fee in the beginning, I've like set myself up to get more satisfied clients, because I can give them the time and attention it needs. And again, it goes back to building this trust thing. It's like that writer is now going to talk to his or her friends and say, no, my dev editor pays attention to the smallest thing. She's never caught napping. So it just builds your reputation. You have to start off the way you mean to finish. I think it's a mistake that I've seen a lot of rookies make in trying to get that job by dropping their price and then really not having covered their time well enough. So then they do a shabby job. And then if you do a shabby job, you don't get the returns. And nowadays, I get a lot of clients through my teaching, but everybody that I'm not actively getting through my teaching comes as repeat clients or referrals, right? Direct referrals, like, so-and-so, you worked on so-and-so's book. They said that you might be able to help me. So, so I know that my writers are out there saying good things, and it's going to pay dividends for years to come, because then I'm going to do a good job on that book. And then that, it's and it keeps growing like that. But you have to put yourself in a position where you can do a great job. And you have to put yourself in a position where you're always thinking, what is the barrier? The barrier is trust. Like, how can I put myself in a position either by teaching them or being on a panel, or so that people can see you and think, oh, I actually like before I've given her a cent, I like what she says. I think she can help me. And then they come to you after they've sold themselves. You don't have to sell them. You just have to kind of tell them to brace, because it's going to be really painful, and it's going to be expensive. If you do it my way, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And it kind of goes back to like the first thing, like, as you said, just to kind of start off with one thing and grow. The second part of that is to be excellent, be like amazing at your job, and to like under promise and over deliver. It's just to have those satisfied customers who keep coming back. And if you have imposter syndrome, or you're worried, or you're just kind of new at this, don't immediately kind of just charge less than what you're worth. Reiterating what Sharon says, this is very intensive, and so there is that you get what you pay for. I think that Reedsy is a really good place to start if you have nothing, like no credentials built up already. And I know, former author who's doing really well, and she kind of built her credibility through Reedsy. And then, now she's, getting the same amount that, I would get, or anybody with, not at your level, but I think that it's really important to kind of look at the market and just always make sure that you're delivering more than other people. Just the value of it. It's not the actual money, it's the value.
Right.
And yes, definitely repeat clients. And, I've managed to do jobs for people, and then they became my coaching clients. So being able to, I'm sorry. Okay, so I just got Linda's text. We have one question so far. I think that's, Sharon, do you have any other last thoughts, or?
No, not at all. Just that I think that, I mean, for me, myself, I've never relied on the web. Like, I'm not, I don't post my shingle anywhere except for on my website. And then, as I've told you, quite frankly, Susan, I don't get a lot of business from my website at all. So my clientele has always come primarily through teaching or speaking, or doing seminars like this, which doesn't mean that that's the only way to get it, but it means that it's, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, what you need then is to think, okay, how can I put myself out there in a way where I'm not selling anybody anything. I'm just showing them that I know what I'm talking about, and there's so many opportunities to do that, because there's so many writers conferences just like desperate to get editors, because they know how to get authors, but to actually get the industry people is more difficult for them. And so I would start there. Start at some writers conferences.
About dev editing, because I know from being in-house that there's so much less time, to actually do editing. And so I think that we're going to actually get a lot more business, because even if there are fewer publishing slots, because things might be shrinking due to recent events, that it's even more competitive. And so as long, excuse me, as we can, if aspiring authors do want to be traditionally published, find like editors like Sharon to work with, who's already proven that she's managed to get her authors pub deals. It's just,
well, but also the other thing is that I have gotten referrals from publishers who the book isn't good enough. They don't have the time in house to spend on this book, but they would quite like to see it again in a better shape. So then they'll go take it to Sharon. And and one of my clients came that way, like from a small publisher saying, go talk to my friend Sharon. By the time we'd finished with the book, she decided that she wasn't going to go back to the small publisher. She went to Random House and she signed like this big, huge 6-figure deal. So it's like, that I think that when you're talking about imposter syndrome, that was the moment when I lost my imposter syndrome, because I was like, no matter what I charged her, it was like nothing compared to the deal she now had.
yeah.
Huge deal that she signed. Yeah.
May I ask the question that we have from the audience, or I don't know, Susan, if you have access to it, if you'd like to read it?
No, I don't think
No?
we, I
Okay,
see
I'll
the
read
chats,
it.
but, oh, sorry, go on.
It comes from Kelly, and the question is, writers come with very different levels of experience and confidence. How much, if any, do you tailor your DE process to meet them where they are? Do you have a level below you which you will always turn writers down?
So if you ask the question now, I'm editing now with such demand that I not only do I not take writers below a certain level, but I actually turn away books that are very good, promising books, but not subjectively books that I want to spend the next 3 weeks with. So I'm now in the very lucky position of picking books that kind of excite me and that I would want to read, even if you weren't paying me, and yippee, now you're going to pay me on top. So in the beginning, though, that was not the case, right? In the beginning, I had to take books that I wasn't so crazy about because I needed to fill that pipe. And so putting it out there that I'm a Tiger editor really helps. Like, even if they're new writers, it helps them kind of brace for it. Then I tell them physically to brace. I go, okay, brace, brace, brace. And then on top of that, yes, I do make sure for like really super newbie writers, I do make sure 2 things. First, that I tell them what I like first, so that there's like this little pillow of encouragement that they can start with. And I haven't read a book yet. I've read some very badly written books, but I haven't read a book yet that doesn't have a single redeeming feature in it. So I focus on those redeeming features. And then the second thing is that I do this with my writers in class, like when we do group critiques, it's like I try not to belabor a fault that is repeated time and time again. So I don't, if you keep rescuing your heroine, I will tell you the first 3 times you're rescuing again. And then on the 3rd time, I'll say, because I don't want you to be confused that from this point on, you don't rescue. I'll actually put a note saying 3rd rescue from now on, look out for your rescues, not mentioning anymore. And that makes it easier to swallow than I've got 176. You're rescuing all the way through the manuscript. So I will do that for the kind of less experienced one. If I have a writer coming back for their 3rd edit who I've worked with before and who I'm frustrated with because they're still rescuing, then I'm going to write you're rescuing all the way through to the end. But by the 3rd edit, they know how I work, and so they're okay with it. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Okay, any more questions? Or
Let me see. We don't have any more questions. You guys were incredibly thorough today with all the information. And can you post again, Susan, your slide with your contact information? And
yeah, I'm gonna just, since we have time, I'm just gonna quickly go through my deck. Which
there's a question about how we charge our clients.
Okay. Let's address that first. Sharon, do you want to go first? Or?
Sure, I'm happy to go first. So I keep it very, very simple for myself. I charge a flat rate. I don't take anything over 100,000 words unless it's pre-negotiated up front, because that's like the kind of size where for me it gets slightly indigestible and it doesn't fit into my schedule very well. So anything under 100,000 words, and I edit MG, so that goes down to a 30,000 word book. I just charge a flat rate of $5,000. For the $5,000, I tell you very, very frankly what you're going to get. You're going to get what I call a dev edit report. I think Susan calls it a letter. Mine usually run from 6 to 12 pages, somewhere in there. And it's a discussion of very briefly what you're doing well, and then in a lot of detail, the big structural issues that need to be improved for this book to work better. On top of that, as a bonus, there's an annotated manuscript, because I annotate as I read, and I annotate on the first read. A lot of editors don't do that, but I always annotate on the first read. So you're seeing how a reader reacts as a reader would when they pick up their book, your book. And in my dev edit, I usually will say, if the dev edit makes sense to you and you think you know where you need to go from the report, ignore the line notes. The line notes will only like just get in the way and depress you. But if you can't really understand what I'm talking about, then go and have a look at the line notes.
Okay, so I charge, I'm sorry.
I was going to just clarify also that I only do dev edit. So a lot of editors like Susan will do but for me, I read so deeply that, I have to just do the big edit. It's the big edit or nothing.
Okay, so I actually do offer several services, and excuse me, I charge, excuse me, about twice as much for a dev edit as for a manuscript assessment. I have a whole rate sheet, but basically it's, what I say is that I'll do a manuscript assessment, which is a global thing, but it doesn't go into as much depth as a developmental edit. And it's anywhere from between like $1,500 to $2,000. And I do charge, I just started this year, I raised my rates for this year, and I do charge extra for anything above 80,000 words. And I also have like an hourly coaching rate. And I did a ton of research because I got into this fairly recently, and I asked Sharon, and then I looked at a lot of other things, and I sort of like tried to sort of gauge where I felt like my years of experience, and I pretty much nailed what I was gonna, all of my estimates and things, and I felt good enough to raise the rates. But I feel like I am definitely delivering more value than like if somebody has a problem paying. Like basically I say like, for like, let's say a middle grade manuscript assessment, I say I'm going to do like 3 to 5 pages. Often it's like 8 pages. So, but everything sort of evens out. And I'm just going to go to my screen because I'm sure everyone's aware of all of these resources, but I'll just go through quickly. This is Sharon. So these are like the rate charts that I looked at, the Editorial Freelancers Association. Sharon was kind enough to send me the Right Life, and that's when she said you should get paid because those rates are much higher than the EFA, but I also talked to a lot of other, editors that I know. And then I think that Readsy, even though it's sort of at a lesser level, it's a really good way to kind of get your foot in the door if you don't feel like you have all of the credentials from having come from like publishing or whatnot. As long as you can kind of get in there, you can quote whatever you want. And so I actually don't teach anymore. I do presentations like this, and I get most of my clients through my website. And on Readsy, I have it like, so when I get most of my clients, about 50% of the people who contact me ghost me because they can't afford my rates. And out of the remaining 50, I book maybe 80%. So, but on Readsy, I think I have tried for like maybe 15 jobs and gotten 3. So, but that's fine because I think that a lot of people are newbie authors going for the lowest common denominator, which is just fine because, probably, I don't actually turn down jobs because it's like really bad writing, but I feel like I haven't seen what happens on Readsy when they're paying very low rates.
And a lot of times, something we've discussed in the past through Penn members here and through the Penn chat about Readsy is that even though it's not ideally the rate that a lot of editors, you still have the freedom to charge the highest rate you want, right, to weed out clients that you might not want to have. And so you can make Readsy work for you in a way.
And it's also marketing because people like, it does have good SEO. So like, I pop up on Readsy, and people find me there, and then they just contact me through my website, which is ideal because it's been a great marketing tool, and I've gotten a lot of great clients.
We have one more question, Susan, and
right, go on.
Mike. Sangeeta is asking, how long do your edit letters tend to be? And I think we talked about that. You said you're in between 12 to 16 pages, I believe.
No, mine tends to top out at about 12. Mine tends to top out at 12. Yeah.
And then she's asked, for example, do you allot a paragraph to each plot, character, pacing, tension? Do you try to make certain that the positive attributes of the book is at least a paragraph long or longer?
The positive attributes is always my starting paragraph. So, congratulations on writing a full, really, I've written manuscripts. Yeah, just finishing a draft is like something to be proud of. And then what I like about it. But then after that, it's really what that book demands. So I don't go, I'm going to do plot. There are no plot problems. There won't be a plot paragraph. Yeah.
Great. And then we have one more question from, I believe it's Aileen. And Aileen, we might need you to clarify a little bit, but when you provide editing, what is your process and how many rounds of editing do you do? But because we're talking of developmental editing, I think what you mentioned, Susan, was that you do a full read through with annotations. And then do you read through it a second time for the dev edit, or are you doing both consistently? I'm sorry, continuously.
No, so I think I'm unusual. Most of the dev editors that I know will do a first read to get a feel of the book and then come back on a second closer round. I do all my work on that first round. So the annotations are on that first round. And then I'm making notes at the same time for my big dev notes at the end. Then I write the dev report. And then if there's a second look, it's going to be because now that I'm writing the dev report, I'm not sure if I missed something, or if I will then go back and read again to double check that my dev notes are actually accurate and that I got it, that I got the book. But it's only if I'm insecure about that. And dev editing sometimes takes many rounds, which is why I have some clients who, I'll see the same work like 2 or 3 times as well. So.
Excellent.
So I'm actually going to offer examples of a manuscript assessment that will be part of the resources of this after the session. And so that is one that I got permission. It's one that I wrote last year, and it's a YA book. And so it was about 8 pages. I think that was one where I kind of over delivered. But again, I cannot do less because he paid me my lowest fee. I just did what I thought was needed. And so that particular one was about 17 or 18 hours. And then I'm going to give an example of a developmental editing letter and also in manuscript notes / line edits. But those 2 are actually from my being on staff at Tor Life, because I haven't done any dev edit letters where I asked permission of the authors to share the material, but it's actually the same approach. And for dev editing and manuscript notes, I do whatever the manuscript needs. It's just everything from like the high level overview to like chapter notes. And then, if they hire so I don't like to touch a manuscript file unless I get paid extra, because like line editing to me can be, it can take me an hour to do like a 5-page chapter. So it's not really worth it for me unless they're actually paying me for that.
Great. I just wanted to reassure everyone that all the slide deck that Susan is talking about and these additional handouts and the letter will be posted with this video on the PEN website. It is a member benefit, so it'll be there alongside with the video. After this, probably within the next 48 hours, it'll be posted.
And on my slide deck, I just put extra, like all of my, like I love, I'm just such a nerd. Like when I was in publishing, and I still do, I read all of the books about publishing. So I just put some of my favorite resources on craft and business. But I do want to point out that one of my favorite resources is this book called Dear Genius, which are the collected letters of Ursula Nordstrom, which was actually created when I was at HarperCollins, because Leonard Marcus, who actually gathered her letters, she's like the legendary editor of like Maurice Sendak and E.B. White, and just so amazing. And that's actually how I learned to edit, is I read everybody's editorial letters. And that's what I would highly like, if you can, if you, are just getting into it and just can see samples of editorial letters. Like, that's why I do offer like, examples so that you can look and see. And that's why I asked Sharon for her letter. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have a lot to live up to. And then I asked another friend. And so I think that's the best way to learn, actually.
And Bob Gottlieb has a new book out as well. So
Oh, isn't that a movie?
yeah, but there's a movie and a book.
I have to.
Yeah.
I read his book. I read everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to grow up to be Bob Gottlieb. But there was a question from Sherry about how much time we spend, Susan, on a dev edit of 80,000.
Yeah. So that the manuscript assessment that I'm showing here, which is about 7 to 8 pages, it was about 80,000 words. It's YA, sort of paranormal fantasy. that took me about 17 hours. And so I think, and I always do the math. So that one I earned under 100, which was my baseline. I wanted to earn $100 an hour. I'll show you the screen. But then like it evened out, because I had several sort of like middle grade books that were 50,000 words, and then I earned like my dev editing fee, which was 3,000. So I think when all was said and done last year, I had about 35 clients, and my average hourly was $140 an hour. And so that's when I decided to raise my rates this year. And then like it turned out to average around 4 cents per word, which is a little higher than I charge. But okay, so this is like a manuscript assessment that are you seeing my manuscript assessment? Okay, so yeah. You can like read it over in detail, but it does sort of cover. Oh, and I stole this critique form from the SCBWI because I thought it was a really great sort of tool, and hopefully it's okay, but it's a critique form, but it does that sandwich thing, which is just what are the good things about this, and then what needs work. So right now I'm showing you like one thing I highly recommend is, even if you don't really know that much about traditional publishing, that there are all these free resources. Like these are the newsletters that I actually get every day. It's something that I did when I was in-house, but you can just be like a consumer off the street and just be interested in publishing. And like, for example, this Edelweiss thing, you can sign up and get publishers' catalogs for like, the upcoming years. And so I'm always suggesting that people sign up for this. It's just amazing, amazing stuff. It teaches you how to pitch, it's catalog copy, it's marketing copy, it's excellent. So I joined Professional Editors Network in January of 2022, and their resources are great. And then Editorial Freelancers Association, and Sharon and I'm sure everybody, great fans of Jane Friedman. She's amazing. And Sangeeta too, she has a column with Jane Friedman. So these are some of the craft resources that I particularly love. Some of them are longstanding, like self-editing for fiction writers. Some of these I discovered just through people's posts on Editorial Freelancers board. And Annie Lamott, one of my favorites. I tried to alphabetize, but I got it wrong, so just ignore that. I did it quickly. Dear Genius, highly, highly recommend. It's just amazing letters from like a legendary editor. Some of them are very funny. And then I just discovered Tiffany Yates Martin's intuitive editing. Like everything that she says in this book, I wish I had said, because she's in my head, but she's amazing. So business resources, I just go to the, like, get stuff out of the library. But I would like to make six figures. So I read that. Freelance Editor's Handbook I thought was really good. You know, some of the standards, classics, Freelancer's Bible. I read a lot about like the gig work, marketing. I always like to, you know, just kind of go through other sort of, not about freelance editing, but just how to market just in general. You know, this is a really great resource, the Science, Art, and Voodoo of Freelance Pricing and Getting Paid. And then like even something like The Art of Client Service, which is from advertising. Just I try to just sort of take a broad sort of supply of everything. I just, you know, everything sort of feeds my business, and it's I wish I had done this sooner. Left my corporate job. It's a great business to be in. And I do want to say that what I've discovered in the last year is that I can be so much more on the side of authors, my clients, than I ever was as an in-house editor. Because when you're in-house, you're always speaking for the house. You're corporate. So you have to speak with somebody else's mouth often. And as a freelance editor, when I work with an author who, even if they're not so great yet, or their book is, you know, not going to be marketable as it's currently written, you know, just that sense of empathy is just really, like, I really love helping them. And I think that that genuine sort of authenticity, that you're seeing what they're trying to do and help them achieve it, and get to whatever level they can get. But be honest with them, because the market is the market, and it's just, you can't control that. So anyway, Sharon, do you have anything else to add? Or
yeah, I actually wanted to add one thing about you know, when you're talking about building business and maybe there are fewer gigs out there. I think that, you know, what doesn't get talked about very often in this business is that mentorship is so powerful and so important in this business. So like in my career, I've mentored now, like Susan was kind enough to say that I mentored her. So we count her, I've mentored three and a half editors. And so that means that right now I'm taking maybe 10% of the work that comes to me. You know, I pass on 90% of my projects. And so, and it was true when I started. I got a lot of work from Amy Noveski, who is my editor at Chronicle when I started. So I think that, yeah, you know, writers are very good at forming like writing communities and writers groups, and then they support each other and they network and go to each other's stuff. Editors need to do that more too. You guys need to like get to know each other face to face and find 6 of you that you really like. And then, you know, if the timing is not right, pass that job to somebody else. I've talked to editors about this, and they've been like, oh no, because, you know, I'm feeding my competitor. It's like, don't worry, you can't take that job anyway, because you can't do it in their time frame. Pass it on. That person one day is going to return the favor and pass it back. But in the passing of the work, something important got done, which is that trusting that we were talking about, right? The writer that comes in trusts an editor that another editor has recommended. You know what I mean? So it gets you over that whole hurdle of trust. Like, you don't have to sell yourself. The person who referred you has already sold you. So you kind of really need to get this going. I know about, I'm going to say, I know 10 dev editors, and, you know, we pass our projects back and forth. Sometimes it's like more one directional than the other, but in the long run, it all evens out. And a dev editor, if you think that you can spot a good dev editor, go make friends with them, because if they're any good, they get full. All of my editor friends, Susan, like in one heartbeat. Well, I think she shouldn't say that I mentored her. It's like, didn't even get to give her any job because her pipeline filled up. So it's like, if you're any good, you get full, and then you have work to pass on. So make sure that you, I hate the word networking because it sounds so calculating, but just like make sure that you build a community of people who are doing what you're doing, who love doing what you love doing, and who you can help and who can help you.
Absolutely. So we're kind of late, but I'm gonna ask one last question because I don't want to leave anybody unacknowledged. Kelly had one more question and we'll wrap up the meeting with this question if that's okay. I do have some announcements to make after we're done, however. Kelly wanted to know, do you offer any live follow-up under that flat fee, such as a phone call or a query email exchange?
I always offer a follow-up of a Zoom, like a face-to-face. Before COVID, I'd actually meet them and have a face-to-face chat. So there's always a follow-up. And I'm very, once the edit's been done, yeah, I always say an hour, but I don't really care. They can come back 2 or 3 times. I'm quite happy to answer questions.
I do exactly the same thing. And I think that this is what builds like clients' loyalties, because it's not like you're not nickel and diming them. I think that that's like the exact wrong way to go about it. And so I never close that door. I leave it really wide open, and I try to be as generous as possible because I think, you know, it's good for business, but it's also, it's just like, I have such sympathy for authors. I'm not one myself, but I know how lonely it is and how much in your head you get. So I really try to, you know, I always end my letters that I'm off. Please accept this advice in the spirit of constructive criticism, but empathy with which it is offered. So I think that has done a lot to sort of make my clients know that I care about them and what they're trying to do.
Right, and the caring is the part, you know, by the time you finish the dev edit. So when Sherry asked how long you spend, I might charge more than Susan, but I think I'm getting paid less per hour because I'm such a slow
How many hours? How many hours for like
God, I think I always ask for 6 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. So I might be reading 2 hours a day through the 6 weeks. I am a really slow reader, and so I think that if there are 5 working days in a week over 6, that's 32, that's 60. So I'm working 60 hours on the book. So yeah, I need to learn how to read fast if I can. But at the end of the 60 hours though, that's not just the author's book. It's like you feel like you birthed this baby. So therefore you can come back and ask me as many questions as you want for as long as you want, because I've
internalized it.
Yeah, that sense of partnership is really sincere. You really do feel like, you know, and it's not a tap that you can turn off. So, but the good thing is to be in a position now where that happens 100% of the time, because I'm picking books that I know I'll love right from the start, you know.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you both so much, Susan and Sharon. It was wonderful having you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. And I'll be in touch with both of you after the meeting as well tomorrow by email. Before we go, I have a few quick announcements. On March 14th at 1 p.m. Central Time, we will be hosting the panel Moving Between Fiction and Nonfiction Editing with guest speakers Andrew Hodges, Kelly Holgren, Scott Pearson, and Nadia Jaja Piupa. And there are also going to be some upcoming changes at the Penn board level. So we are going to be announcing some new exciting volunteer opportunities that are opening up soon for Penn members. And we like to say, or I like to say, that volunteering is a superpower, and it's where a lot of your work will come from. When you're volunteering for editorial organizations, that's a lot of times how people learn how you work and what your work ethic is, and will get referrals through that. For those of you today that are attending as guests, we hope that you enjoyed your sample of Penn programming. As mentioned, you can learn about joining the Professional Editors Network at pennsite.org/join. And membership does give you unlimited attendance to meetings like these, to the recordings of past meetings, and a listing on Penn's searchable online directory, plus a lot of other benefits like some socials and in-person networking for those of you in the Twin Cities. And finally, we will be sending out a survey about this event to everyone who registered for today's webinar. And this basically helps us make future events better. So please, if you have 2 minutes, fill it up so we can make sure that we're offering the kind of programming that you're expecting from your membership with Penn. So thank you everyone for being with us. Have a wonderful evening, and it was great meeting both of you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.